Mexico sent 26 alleged cartel figures to face justice in the United States because the Trump administration requested them and Mexico did not want them to continue running their illicit businesses from Mexican prisons, officials said on August 13. The mass transfer was not, however, part of wider negotiations as Mexico seeks to avoid higher tariffs threatened by U.S. President Donald Trump. The 26 prisoners handed over to American authorities on Tuesday included figures aligned with the Jalisco New Generation Cartel and the Sinaloa Cartel, among others. They were wanted by American authorities for their roles in drug trafficking and other crimes. It comes months after 29 other cartel leaders were sent to the U.S. in February. In the exchange, the U.S. Justice Department promised it would not seek the death penalty against any of the 55 people included in the two transfers, which experts say may help avoid any violent outbursts by the cartels in response. Authorities said the operation involved nearly 1,000 law enforcement officers, 90 vehicles, and a dozen military aircraft. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said earlier that the transfers were sovereign decisions, but the move comes as the Mexican leader faces mounting pressure by the Trump administration to crack down on cartels and fentanyl production. Mexican Security Minister Omar Garcia Harfuch confirmed that a U.S. government drone, non-military, was flying over central Mexico, but at the request of Mexican authorities as part of an ongoing investigation. So far, Sheinbaum has tried to show the Trump administration a greater willingness to pursue the cartels than her predecessor, a change that has been acknowledged by U.S. officials, and continued to slow migration to the U.S. border in an effort to avoid the worst of Trump's tariff threats. 2 weeks ago, the two leaders spoke and agreed to give their teams another 90 days to negotiate to avoid threatened 30% tariffs on imports from Mexico.
As part of the actions to guarantee public safety, reduce violence in our country, and protect the public, yesterday, in coordination, cooperation, and with full respect for sovereignty and international reciprocity with the government of the United States, the transfer of 26 generators of violence was carried out. It was agreed with that country's Department of Justice not to seek the death penalty, either for the initial 29 who were transferred in February, nor for these 26 who were recently transferred. This decision was made in the national interest and under the highest security standards for our country. This is a sovereign decision made in accordance with the national security law and by determination of the National Security Council, as part of an action aligned with the national strategy against extortion, aimed at protecting our country's population. These high-profile criminals, who even while incarcerated, continue to direct illegal activities through visits that cannot be prohibited out of respect for their human rights. However, these interactions were being used to maintain criminal operations, threaten officials, and expand networks of corruption and intimidation, which posed an unacceptable risk to security. Many of them had obtained injunctions to remain in low-security prisons, and it was even anticipated that others, currently held in federal penitentiaries, would receive similar rulings that would facilitate their transfer to less secure state prisons, increasing the risk of continuing their criminal operations or even the risk of escape. There were also lawsuits and legal appeals seeking their early release, which, if granted, would have represented a setback in the fight against crime and an affront to the victims. It is important to point out that this action was taken as a measure to prevent them from continuing to order kidnappings, extortions, homicides, and other crimes from prison. This is an act of authority, the result of a zero-impunity policy and the absolute coordination of the Security Cabinet, key pillars that are part of our national security and anti-extortion strategy. These 26 individuals, who were being held in 5 federal penitentiaries and 4 state penitentiaries, had extradition orders and were facing various investigations for high-impact crimes in the United States as well, including human trafficking, homicide, drug trafficking, firearms offenses, money laundering, and organized crime. These individuals took the lives of innocent people, ordered or participated in attacks against authorities, contributed to the production and distribution of millions of doses of drugs, and through their illegal operations generated violence and fear in entire communities for many years. Considering the activities these individuals have been involved in, which are linked to high-impact crimes and represent a threat to the security of our country and the United States, that is why the Security Cabinet, in close coordination with the Attorney General's office, proceeded to carry out the transfer of these targets. This operation involved 988 personnel and 90 vehicles from the Secretariat of National Defense, the Navy, the National Guard, the Secretariat of Security and Citizen Protection, as well as the Attorney General's office. From Military Air Base No. 1, using 11 aircraft from the National Defense and 1 aircraft from the Navy, the transfer was carried out to the following cities in the United States: 8 to White Plains, New York; 1 to John F. Kennedy, also in New York; 5 to San Diego, California; 6 to Phoenix, Arizona; and 6 to Dulles, Virginia. The actions of guarding and transferring these individuals were carried out in accordance with institutional protocols, and at all times there was medical and legal staff present to ensure full respect for their human rights. Currently, the penitentiary centers where these inmates were held are operating completely normally, and no incidents were reported during these operations. We remind you that last February, 29 criminal leaders were transferred to the United States. Despite being classified as highly dangerous, various judges issued orders to postpone their extraditions. For example, in the case of Miguel Angel N., also known as Zeta 40, his process was postponed 79 times. In the case of Oscar N., also known as Zeta 42, his procedure was postponed 54 times, just to mention 2 of those involved. These 2 individuals were responsible for the murder of 17 public servants who worked as guards in federal penitentiaries, and they constantly threatened and intimidated the staff. That is why these transfer actions are not only a strategic measure to ensure public safety, but also a firm decision to make sure these criminals do not continue operating from within the penitentiaries and to break their networks of influence. But they also represent an act of justice and dignity for the victims. With these actions, we reaffirm that the Mexican state does not collude with criminals and that the safety of the people of Mexico is the top priority. We thank all the personnel who took part in this important operation, men and women from the Secretariat of National Defense, the Secretariat of the Navy, the Secretariat of Security, the National Intelligence Center, and the Office of the Attorney General.